Do you have big plans? Really big ones? In today's episode, we are going to present a Danish company form that is for those who think big.
Welcome to the Business Lessons in Denmark podcast. Our podcast gives the answers to your business-related questions that have not been answered yet, or things that haven't even crossed your mind. My name is Edina Bohos, and I am here with my colleague Katalin Balog. We are owners of Kuulakon CPS, Danish accounting office. Hi Kati, this is the 12th episode of our podcast, which means that it has been 3 months since we started. Incredible. Don't you feel that these 3 months have passed quickly?
Yes, I do. Time really flew by.
Yes, and we really appreciate the many positive feedback and would like to thank those who follow the podcast on the diverse platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast.
By the way, it's interesting to see that we are not only listened to in Denmark. Statistics show that 78% of our listeners listen to us from Denmark, 11% from the USA, and the remaining 11% of listeners from various other countries.
I was actually surprised that we even have listeners in Mexico.
Yeah, me too. But we also have listeners in the Netherlands, in Germany, and Romania. I could have never imagined this. In any case, we are very, very happy about it. And we promise that we will continue to come out with a lot of useful and relevant content.
That's right. Well, let's move on to the topic of today's episode. In the previous episodes, we covered almost the entire spectrum of company forms. There is only one more common company form left, which is for people who dream really big, who like to think really big, like me.
Yeah, exactly. Perhaps the listener already guessed that we are going to talk about the joint stock company today. This form of company also exists in Denmark and is called aktieselskab, which is abbreviated as AS. A joint stock company, or AS in Danish, is a form of business where the owners own their part of the company in shares, in the form of shares. There are quite big joint stock companies in Denmark that everyone knows, like Maersk, Danske Bank, Tivoli, Vestas, Ørsted, and I could continue. Anyone can buy the shares of these companies, but there are also joint stock companies whose shares cannot be bought by anybody.
And how can such a joint stock company be funded?
You will need a founding document and the articles of association. And with this company, you will also need a board of directors. And of course, the starting capital must also be available.
Speaking of starting capital, how much is that?
400,000 Danish crowns.
Oh my God, that's the price of a car.
Yeah. By the way, it also applies here that the starting capital can be invested not only in the form of money, but also in the form of some assets or valuables. It could be a car, an expensive machine, or even a company. For example, if you have a well-run sole proprietorship, you can even bring that into the AS as the starting capital.
Yes, I think it must be the tax-free company transformation you mean here, which we talked about in episode number 10, which means that a person can transform his sole proprietorship into an APS or even into an AS, it seems.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's take my example. I have a Hungarian restaurant and a little guest house. Should I transform these companies into an AS?
Your restaurant operates in the form of APS, and so does your guest house. In other words, both are in a company form that is already good and safe for you. The AS actually has two advantages compared to the APS. On the one hand, it has more prestige. because in general it is a bigger company. The start capital is also significantly higher, right? If you want more recognition in the market, you will gain more respect with an AS than with an APS. The other point is that if you want to take your company to the stock exchange, you can only do so with a joint stock company.
Take it to the stock market. Why would this be good for me?
If you want to grow, but you don't have the necessary means, then you need to raise capital. So if you want to develop your small guest house into a huge hotel chain, then you need to attract quite some capital. If you take the company to the stock exchange, then people can buy your shares. Uncle Joe, Aunt Mary, and so on, anyone can buy it. If many people buy your shares, then you will have a lot of capital that you can invest and realize your hotel chain dreams.
Well, that sounds a lot better than a huge debt to the bank. In fact, one probably wouldn't even get such a big loan.
Yeah, certainly not. But if you succeed with getting more capital into your company, then you could move to a completely different dimension. But for all of this, you must first convert your company into an AS. And then you will have to start the process of taking your company to the stock exchange, during which you will have to meet very strict requirements, actually.
Okay, but if I understood correctly, I can have an AS even if I don't want to take it to the stock exchange. That is, if I don't want to, that anyone could buy the shares of my company.
Yeah, that is completely right. As you are developing your business, one day you might get to a point where you say that you want an even more prestigious company form. And then you convert them from APS to AS. Your AS will also have shares in this case, but you may be the only owner of all the shares alone, or maybe there will be some other owners if you want to involve your family members or someone else.
Okay, anyway, it seems to me that these two company forms, APS and AS, are quite similar, even their names are similar.
Yes, there is only one letter difference in the two names, and that's why they are sometimes confused. It is true that they have many similarities, apart from the name, namely that the liability of the owner or owners is limited in both cases. So, for example, in the case of an eventual bankruptcy, the owner can only lose as much as he invested into the company.
Yeah, I have already learned that where starting capital has to be paid, liability is limited.
Yeah, it's a very good observation. In fact, the size of the starting capital is the most significant difference between them. For an APS, a minimum of 40,000 Danish crowns is required, while the AS, for the AS, this number is 400,000 Danish crowns. There are other differences, but this is probably the most important.
AS as a company form sounds interesting, but it seems almost unrealistic due to the large initial capital. Do you know many people who have AS?
Well, not so many, but we have a client who is actually considering to transform his very successful APS into an ES. His motivation is also that the company would have more authority and prestige in this way. And I understand because it's likely that when the bigger, well-paying construction projects look for contractors, then they take a company that is called an AS probably more seriously. And he's in this kind of industry, so yeah, advantage.
Yeah, this is probably right. Now I see the possibilities in this company form, and one day when I really want to become a hotel chain owner, we will come back to this.
Yeah, feel free to knock on my door. Don't forget that Apple also started from a garage. Microsoft, Amazon are the same. These are American companies, but there are also huge and very successful companies in Denmark. Novo Nordisk got included in the 20 most valuable stock exchange registered joint stock companies in the world a few months ago. Well, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla are still higher on the list, but Novo Nordisk is currently more valuable than Samsung or MasterCard.
Novo Nordisk, this is the Danish company that makes insulin, right?
Right, yeah, insulin among other things. And they have been doing very, very well for quite a long time already with the insulin alone, especially because they are also present on the American market. But last year, they introduced their weight loss medicine. And since then, their sales and the company value has just rocketed.
Wow, interesting. Thanks for the perspective. I can see there is still room for improvement for my little companies, but who knows what the future brings.
Right.
Now we have discussed the most relevant company forms in Denmark. There are a couple more, but we will not deal with them because they are not so common. But then what else are we going to talk about in the upcoming episodes?
Well, now comes the interesting part. Because when a person already has their own company, that's when the game actually begins. I trust that our episodes so far were helpful for those who are contemplating opening a business. But once you have your company, there are a lot of things you need to know right away, starting with what obligations you have, how to set your prices, what expenses you can account for, what about taxes, what about pension, and so on.
Yes, there is plenty more to talk about. I'm not afraid that we will run out of topics.
Yeah, neither do I. We will focus on the topics that customers ask about the most, as well as on the ones that surprise them the most because they had no idea that such a thing even existed.
Yeah, great. Sounds very good. Today's episode was sponsored by Kulakon CPS. Kulakon CPS can help with starting your company with bookkeeping and tax matters. In addition, we also provide business and financial consulting. If you like the show, then follow us and like our Facebook page. If you would like to contact us, you can do so via our website, www.account.call. We wish you a successful week.